Right then, let's set the scene. You're not born into silks and velvets, no silver spoon clutched in your tiny fist. But you're not exactly a gutter rat either, not yet anyway. You enter this world in a medieval town, a place of muddy lanes, timber-framed houses leaning conspiratorially towards each other, and the ever-present smell of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and something vaguely metallic you can't yet name. Your first few years are a blur of rough-spun linen, your mother's worried face, and the four walls of a home that feels oddly detached from the bustling life you hear just beyond the door. You've got a roof, usually a pottage, that's more water than anything else, but it's food. You're one of the lucky ones, truth be told. You've made it past those treacherous first few years where babes have a nasty habit of just slipping away. These are the figures shrouded in black, the ones who dealt out justice with a swing of an axe or the pull of a rope. From the moment they're born into this world, their fate is all but sealed. Their story is one of social ostracization, brutal training, and a life steeped in death. So, before we sharpen our blades and step onto the scaffold, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the darker side of history we explore here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and perhaps what profession you're glad you weren't born into in the medieval period. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe light a single flickering candle for that authentic medieval dread. Your world is small, deliberately so. Mother, a woman whose hands are never still, scrubbing, mending, stirring, always seems to have a reason why you can't play with the other children in the alley. Too rough, she'd say. Or, they have the sweating sickness in that lane. Or, her personal favorite, the butcher's dogs are loose and they've a taste for little fingers. You don't see other children in your home either. No kindly neighbors pop by with a bit of gossip or a spare pie. Your Da, when he's around, is a looming silent presence, his eyes holding shadows you don't understand. He comes and goes, at odd hours, often smelling of iron and something else, something that makes Mother scrub the floors with even more frantic energy after he's left. Then comes a day, you're maybe 5 or 6, old enough to chafe at the invisible leash. Mother needs herbs from the market, and for once, her litany of excuses runs dry, or perhaps your whining finally pierces her maternal armor. She grips your hand, a vice of bone and sinew, and leads you out into the cacophony of the town. It's a shock to your system, the roar of voices, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the dizzying array of smells from fresh bread to a rotting refuse. But what hits you harder than the sensory overload is the reaction of the people. As you pass, conversations falter. Stares, cold and sharp as a winter wind, prickle your skin. Women snatch their own children closer, their faces tight, with something that looks a lot like fear, or worse, disgust. Men spit into the dirt as you walk by, their muttered words snatched away by the breeze, but the venom in their eyes is unmistakable. You tug on your mother's hand, confused. "Why are they looking, Mama?" Her face is a mask, pale and strained. Pay them no mind, child, they're just ignorant folk. But one word, hissed from a stall selling dubious-looking sausages cuts. Through the din, headsman's get. It's not shouted, but it carries, heavy and ugly. Your mother flinches as if struck, her grip tightening until your bones ache. She all but drags you through the rest of her errands, her silence more terrifying than any scolding. The joy of the outing has curdled into a confusing, stomach-churning dread. That night, the questions bubble up, hot and insistent. You corner your Da, a rare feat. He's polishing a long, wickedly sharp axe by the low light of the hearth, the firelight dancing on its gleaming edge. He's a man of few words, but your fear, your desperation, it seems to unlock something in him. He sets the axe down, the sound unnervingly gentle, and pulls you onto his lap. His hands, calloused and strong, feel surprisingly tender. People, Fear what they don't understand, lad, he begins, his voice a low rumble, and they fear what I do. He tells you that he is the king's justice, the man who carries out the sentences of the court. He's the one who stands on the scaffold when a traitor is to be hanged, when a murderer is to lose his head, when a heretic is to meet the flames. He is the town executioner. The word hangs in the air, heavy, suffocating. The man who tucks you into your straw pallet at night, the man whose calloused hand you sometimes hold, is the man who ends lives for a living, and then comes the second blow, the one that truly shatters your small world. It's a family trade, son, he says, his gaze distant, lost in the flickering flames. My father did it before me, and his father before him. It's in our blood, this work. It's our lot. You stare at him horrified. You'd had dreams, vague childish fantasies of being a cooper, shaping wood with clever hands, or maybe a stonemason, building grand churches. Anything but this. The blood-a-letting, the cries, the fear in those eyes he must see. He sees the rebellion, the despair on your face. There's no other path for us, lad, he says, his voice flat, devoid of hope. No decent man will take you as an apprentice. No guild will have you. Our name, it closes doors. This, he gestures to the polished axe, this is our legacy, our curse. The weight of it settles on your small shoulders, an invisible cloak of dread and revulsion. You are your father's son. You are the next in line. Your childhood, so carefully guarded, so strangely isolated, now makes a sickening kind of sense. It wasn't just about protecting you from the world. It was about preparing the world and you for the inevitable. The path ahead is not one of your choosing, but it's laid out before you, stark and unyielding, leading to the foot of the scaffold. The weight of your father's words, that pronouncement of your inescapable destiny, doesn't just settle. It seeps into your bones, a chilling marrow that follows you into your restless sleep and greets you in the gray, unforgiving light of dawn. The world outside your small home, once a place of muffled curiosity, now feels like a vast, hostile wilderness. Every villager's glance is a judgment, every hushed whisper a condemnation of your blood, your name, your very existence. Your mother, bless her tormented soul, tries to shield you, her silence a heavy blanket of unspoken grief. She knows. She's always known. Her attempts to create a semblance of normalcy in your early years now seem like desperate, futile gestures against an oncoming tide. Da. Well, Da is Da. He doesn't speak of it again for a long time, but his expectations hang in the air, thicker than the winter fog that often shrouds your town. There are no more stories of cooperage or masonry whispered in the dark. Those dreams have turned to ash in your mouth. You'll find yourself watching him more closely, this man who is both your father and your jailer. You observe the way he moves, the set of his jaw when he leaves the house, the grim set of his shoulders when he returns, sometimes with a new, haunted look in his eyes that wasn't there before. The vague smells of iron and that other, sweeter, sickening scent become more defined in your mind. You don't ask. You learn early that some questions are best left to fester in the dark corners of your mind. But the knowing is a burden, a stone in your gut that never quite digests. Your world, already small, shrinks further. The excuses for keeping you from other children are no longer needed. They and their parents ensure the distance is maintained. You are marked, an apprentice to a trade no sane man would choose. Then, one bleak afternoon, as you're idly watching the rain lash against the oiled parchment covering your small window, your father beckons. No words, just a jerk of his head towards the outbuilding, a squat, windowless stone shed that leans against the back of your cottage. This is his sanctum, his workshop of death, a place you've instinctively avoided. Your heart hammers against your ribs like a trapped bird. He pushes open the heavy wooden door, and the smell hits you, cold iron, old wood, something acrid that stings your nostrils. and the faint, unmistakable coppery tang of old blood. Light struggles to penetrate the gloom, revealing shapes hanging on the walls. Axes of various sizes, heavy swords, coils of thick rope, branding irons with cruel-looking insignia, and an assortment of knives and cleavers that make your stomach clench. He doesn't explain. He simply picks up a heavy, broad-bladed axe, its edge dulled and bearing a few dark, suspicious-looking nicks. He thrusts it towards you, along with a coarse whetstone. "Sharp," he grunts, his voice devoid of inflection. An executioner's tools must always be ready. A dull blade is a cruel blade. It means a messy job, more suffering. We are not butcher's boy, not if we can help it. We are final. Your hands tremble as you take the cold, heavy steel. The weight of it is terrifying, a palpable manifestation of its purpose. You work for hours. The rhythmic scrape of stone against metal, a harsh soundtrack to your burgeoning despair. Your arms ache, your fingers grow numb, but his eyes are on you, missing nothing. This becomes your new chore, a hideous ritual performed in the grim silence of that shed. You learn the feel of different steels, the specific angles needed for a killing edge, the meticulous care required to maintain instruments designed solely to end human life. You clean away rust, oil the wood of the handles, and try not to imagine the last time each tool was used, the flesh it parted, the life it stole. Not long after your tutelage with the tools begins, he takes you into the town square. It's just past dawn, the market stalls still shrouded, the cobblestones slick with morning dew. He leads you to the center, to the permanent fixture that dominates the space, the scaffold. It's a crude wooden platform, weathered and stained, dark in patches that even the harshest rains haven't managed to bleach away. A heavy, scarred block of wood sits ominously in the center. It needs cleaning, he states, handing you a stiff bristled brush, a pail, and a chunk of harsh gray, soap that smells of lye. The townsfolk don't like to be reminded of what happens here, not when they're buying their bread and baubles, but it must be clean, respect for the process, if not for the condemned. You scrub, your knuckles raw, the fetid ghosts of past executions clinging to the air. You try not to look too closely at the darker stains, not to imagine the scenes that played out on these very boards. But the knowledge is there, a cold sickness in your belly. This too becomes a regular task, a public shaming disguised as a duty. You, the headsman's get, tending to the stage where your future will be played out in blood and terror. The passing years etch lines of worry onto your mother's face and a grim resolve onto your father's. For you, they bring a hardening, a shell forming around the terrified boy within. The taunts from other children become more pointed, their games of make-believe often featuring a villain who looks suspiciously like you, dragged to a mock scaffold. "Axe boy," they'll shriek before their parents pull them away with hissed warnings. "Chip off the old block, that one." You learn to walk with your eyes down, to ignore the spit that sometimes lands near your boots, to build walls of silence around your heart. Your only companions are the silent, demanding tools in the shed and the looming presence of your father, who watches your progress with an unreadable expression. He has yet to make you witness the full horror of his trade, but you feel it coming, like the ominous stillness before a thunderstorm. The weight of steel, the chill of stone, these are your inheritance, your classroom, your future, and the lessons are only just beginning. The grim routine of steel and stone becomes your life's bleak rhythm. Seasons turn, marked not by festivals or harvests in your mind, but by the frequency of your father's departures and the varying states of the tools you're forced to maintain. You're older now, the soft lines of boyhood hardening into the lean, wary angles of a youth burdened by an unspeakable shadow. The dread of what's to come is a constant companion, a cold serpent coiled in your belly. You've learned to read the subtle signs in your father's demeanor, the almost imperceptible tightening of his lips, the deeper shadows under his eyes that herald a summons from the reeve or the baron's court. Each time a silent, desperate prayer forms in your heart. Not yet, please, not yet. Then, one crisp autumn morning, the prayer goes unanswered. Your father finds you in the shed, meticulously sharpening a heavy-headed axe, its edge already keen enough to shave a hair. He watches you for a moment, his expression unreadable as ever. Today you come with me, he says, his voice flat, leaving no room for argument. Not to clean, to watch, to learn. The whetstone slips from your numb fingers clattering onto the stone floor. This is it, the moment you've dreaded, the precipice you've been inching towards for years. There's no plea you can make, no escape you can contrive. Your mother meets your eye as you leave the cottage, her face a mask of anguish, but she says nothing. What could she say? She is as trapped in this life as you are. The walk to the town square is different this time. Usually when you go to clean the scaffold, it's in the quiet solitude of dawn. Now the square is already buzzing, a throng of people pressing in, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity, righteous anger, and barely concealed excitement. It's a spectacle, a grim entertainment. You, walking in your father's long shadow, feel their eyes on you, colder and sharper than ever. You're no longer just the headsman's strange, reclusive son. You are the apprentice, a part of the abhorrent machinery of death itself. They don't see a boy forced into a life he despises. They see a budding monster. Your father leads you to the foot of the scaffold, the very platform you've scrubbed countless times. He positions you to one side, close enough to see everything, yet out of the main path. Observe, he commands, his voice low. Watch the hands, watch the crowd, watch the condemned. Every part of it matters. The air is thick with anticipation, the murmur of the crowd a hungry beast. Then a commotion at the edge of the square. A cart rumbles through, flanked by guards. In it, a man, pale and trembling, his clothes torn, his eyes wide with a terror that makes your own stomach churn. He's dragged from the cart and shoved towards the scaffold steps. He stumbles, weeping, begging for mercy, his voice cracking. From the crowd, you hear a woman's shriek, then the wail of children, his family, forced to witness his end. Their grief is a raw, tearing sound that cuts through the noise. The priest drones through the last rites, his words lost in the prisoner's sobs and the crowd's impatient mutterings. And your father? He changes. The stoic, silent man no recedes, replaced by a figure of cold, impersonal authority. He moves with a practiced efficiency, his face impassive, his eyes focused solely on the task at hand. He is no longer Da. He is the executioner, the town's necessary evil, the embodiment of its brutal justice. He checks the rope, tests the mechanism of the gallows with a chilling precision. There's no malice in him, but no mercy either. Just a job to be done. The noose is slipped over the condemned man's head. The man's legs buckle. The guards hold him upright. Your father gives a curt nod. A lever is pulled, or a bolt is shot, and the platform beneath the man's feet drops away with a sickening thud. There's a ghastly snap, a sound that will echo in your nightmares for years to come. The body jerks, convulses, then hangs limp, swinging slightly in the autumn breeze. The crowd gasps, a collective exhalation of held breath, some turning away, others staring, transfixed. You feel a wave of nausea so profound you have to clutch at the scaffold's rough timbers to keep from falling. The world tilts, the faces in the crowd blurring into a grotesque tapestry of gaping mouths and wide eyes. It's over in moments, yet it stretches into an eternity. The silence that follows is almost worse than the noise, broken only by the heart-rending sobs of the dead man's family. Your father, his duty discharged, steps back, his face still a mask. He glances at you, a flicker in his eyes. Acknowledgement? A test? You can't tell. The crowd begins to disperse, casting dark looks and muttered curses, not just at your father, but at you, the silent apprentice who stood by and watched. Later, after the body is cut down, It is your job, under your father's unwavering supervision, to clean the scaffold. But this time, the stains are fresh, the horror vivid and personal. The faint metallic scent of blood is sharp in your nostrils, no longer an abstract unpleasantness, but a direct link to the life that was just extinguished before your eyes. As you scrub the words your father once spoke in the shed, "We are not butcher's boy," mock you. What you saw felt like butchery, no matter how efficiently performed. It hits you then, a blow more stunning than any physical strike. This isn't just a lesson, a single horrifying event. This is your life. The path is set, and this first bitter taste of death is only the beginning of what you will be forced to consume. The question now, burning in your mind, is what comes after watching? What is the next step on this damnation road? The image of that first hanging, the sound of the neck snapping, the vacant stare of the dead man, these horrors become your unwanted bedfellows. Sleep offers no escape, only a canvas for your mind to repaint the scene in even more vivid, gruesome detail. You see the swinging body in the dancing shadows of your room, hear the children's screams in the howl of the wind. Food tastes like ash in your mouth. The world, already gray, has taken on a permanent blood-red tint at the edges of your vision. You try to speak to your mother, to find some solace in her presence, but she just clutches her rosary tighter, her eyes brimming with a helpless sorrow that mirrors your own. She can offer no comfort, only share in the silent suffering. Your father, the architect of this nightmare, remains an unyielding wall of stone. He offers no words of reassurance, no acknowledgement of the horror he has forced upon you. His expectation is clear. You will endure, you will harden, you will become what he is. The days following that first execution are a blur of your usual grim chores, sharpening tools that now feel heavier, their purpose more sickeningly real, scrubbing a scaffold that stubbornly retains the ghost of what it last hosted. You find yourself flinching at sudden noises, your stomach twisting at the sight of raw meat in the butcher's stall. You are changed, irrevocably, the naive hope that somehow, someday, you might escape this fate has been strangled, left to swing beside the memory of that condemned man. This is your path, and the next stage is about to begin, a descent into a darkness you couldn't have fathomed. One cold, slate-gray morning, your father leads you not to the town square, nor to the tool shed, but to a desolate, wind-swept patch of unconsecrated ground beyond the town walls. This is the charnel field, where the bodies of executed criminals, unclaimed paupers, and suicides are unceremoniously dumped into shallow, lime-dusted pits. The air here is rank with the stench of decay, a cloying sweetness that clings to the back of your throat and makes you want to retch. He stops before a fresh mound of earth from which a pallid hand protrudes, its fingers curled as if grasping for a final breath. He hands you a shovel. "Dig," he commands. When the unfortunate soul is exhumed, a gaunt man, his neck bearing the dark imprint of the rope, your father lays him out on a patch of relatively clean grass. From a worn leather satchel, he produces a set of long, slender knives, tools you haven't seen before, their edges honed to a terrifying sharpness. "An executioner must know the body," he says, his voice calm, almost academic, not like some prattling physician with his herbs and leeches. "We need to know how it breaks, where it feels the most, how to make it talk, or how to silence it cleanly. There are no books for this boy, no pretty drawings, only the truth laid bare." He makes the first incision. You try to turn away, a strangled gasp escaping your lips as the skin parts and the underlying tissues are revealed. But his hand, strong as an iron band, grips your shoulder, forcing you to look. "You will watch. You will learn. Or you will bleed," he says, his voice low and dangerous, a promise more than a threat. And so you watch, your stomach churning, your mind reeling, as he dissects the corpse with a practiced, almost surgical skill. He points out major arteries, explaining how a cut here will lead to a swift end, while a nick there will merely bleed. For show. He traces the paths of nerves, detailing which areas, when stimulated with fire or blade, will produce the most exquisite agony. He shows you the fragility of joints, the way bones can be snapped, the pressure points that can render a man unconscious or screaming. This isn't anatomy for healing. It's anatomy for controlled destruction, for the precise application of pain, hour after agonizing hour, under the indifferent sky with the stench of death filling your senses. The lesson continues. He makes you touch, feel the texture of muscle, the give of cartilage, the cold, unyielding nature of bone. Each unwilling touch is a violation, a piece of your soul being chipped away. He explains that the executioner's role extends far beyond the scaffold. Often, before a man is condemned to die, he must first be persuaded to confess. Torture, he calls it, putting the question. And to do it effectively, to extract the desired information without accidentally killing the subject too soon, one must be an artist of agony, a scholar of suffering. He speaks of the rack, the boot, the branding iron, not as instruments of horror, but as tools of the trade, like his axe or his ropes. You don't like it. You loathe it with every fiber of your being. But with each session, and there are more, each one as stomach-turning as the last, a horrifying kind of understanding begins to dawn. You start to see the grim logic in his madness. You learn, because the alternative, his fist or the switch, is a lesson in pain you're keen to avoid. You learn to identify the tremor in a muscle that signals the edge of endurance, the subtle shift in breathing that indicates a man is about to break. You learn how to keep someone alive, hovering on the brink of death for as long as necessary. The knowledge is vile, a poison seeping into your mind, but it is knowledge nonetheless. You are being reshaped, piece by bloody piece, from a terrified boy into something else, something colder, something capable of understanding the mechanics of another's unmaking. And as you stand there, hands stained, soul battered, a new, even more terrifying question forms. When will he decide you've learned enough from the dead and demand you practice these hellish arts on the living? The lessons carved in the flesh of the dead continue for what feels like an eternity. Each session in the charnel field chips away another piece of your humanity, replacing it with a cold, functional knowledge of anatomy that serves only the darkest purposes. You learn to identify the subtle signs of life, the faint pulse, the shallow breath, not to preserve them, but to know how close you can bring a soul to the edge of death's abyss without letting it tumble in prematurely. Your father's gruff pronouncements on the mechanics of pain, the efficacy of certain torments, become a grotesque catechism you recite in your mind to drown out the screams that echo there from your first witnessed execution. He is relentless, his patience non-existent for any sign of squeamishness or hesitation. The you learn or you bleed rule remains firmly in effect, and the sting of his calloused hand or a birch switch is a frequent reminder of your expected progress. Then, one day, after a particularly gruesome session involving the slow flaying of a pig's carcass, to understand skin and what lies beneath, and how a man might be convinced to speak if he values his own hide, your father straightens up, a flicker of something akin to grim satisfaction in his eyes. You've seen enough of the dead, he declares. It's time you understood the living, or at least those who are about to wish they weren't. The implication hangs heavy, suffocating. You are moving from the theoretical to the practical, and the thought fills you with a dread so profound it eclipses even the horrors you've already endured. He leads you not to the outbuilding, nor the charnel field, but deep into the bowels of the town's small, dank prison, a place rarely seen by any but the guards, the condemned, and now, it seems, you. Down narrow, winding stone steps they descend, the air growing colder, damper, thick, with the smell of mildew, unwashed bodies, and despair. He stops before a heavy iron-banded door from behind which you can hear faint, pitiful whimpers. A guard, his face impassive, unlocks it with a grating shriek of metal. Your father pushes you inside. The room is small, windowless, lit by a single sputtering torch that casts long, dancing shadows on the damp stone walls. In the center, chained to a heavy wooden frame, is a man. He's gaunt, his eyes wild with terror, his body already bearing the marks of previous, less skilled interrogations. Various instruments lie on a nearby table: thumbscrews, a brazier with glowing coals, branding irons, pincers, and other items whose purpose you can only guess at with a sickening lurch of your stomach. This one, your father says, gesturing towards the wretched figure, is accused of stealing from the church tithes. He denies it. The magistrate wishes a confession before the assizes. He is yours to question. Your blood runs cold. You stare at your father, then at the terrified prisoner, a silent plea in your eyes. But your father's face is granite. He picks up a pair of crude iron pincers. You recall what I showed you about the teeth? How they are rooted? A man will say much to save his teeth or his fingernails. Start there. Show me you've learned something beyond gagging at the sight of innards. The first time is a disaster of revulsion and ineptitude. Your hand shakes so violently you can barely hold the instrument. The prisoner's screams, raw and animalistic, tear at your sanity. You fumble, you hesitate, and each mistake earns you a sharp cuff from your father or a scathing critique of your technique. Too soft. You'll be here all night. He needs to feel it, boy, to understand the cost of his silence. He guides your hand, forcing the issue, his grip like iron, his voice a relentless goad in your ear. The stench of fear, sweat, and blood fills the small chamber. You vomit into a corner, but he drags you back, unyielding. You are not just learning to inflict pain, you are learning to overcome your own disgust, your own empathy, to become a detached instrument of his will, and by extension, the will of the law. Slowly, gruesomely, the seasons turn. Prisoner after prisoner is brought before you in that claustrophobic, torch-lit hell. And with each session, a tiny piece of you dies, replaced by a chilling proficiency. You learn how to apply pressure, just so. How to use the threat of pain as effectively as the pain itself. Where to cut deep, where to cut slow. You discover the horrifying resilience of the human body and the equally horrifying depths of its capacity for suffering. You master the art of keeping a man alive, conscious, and coherent enough to confess, even as his body is systematically broken. The screams still haunt your nights, but your hands no longer shake. You learn to operate with a cold, detached precision, your face a mask that mirrors your father's. One day, after a particularly brutal but successful interrogation that leaves a hardened brigand blubbering for mercy and confessing to a string of robberies, your father watches you clean your tools. He gives a single, almost imperceptible nod. You can break them now, he says, a hint of something. Pride, approval, in his tone that chills you to the core. You can do the work without flinching, but just as you think you've reached the nadir of this cursed apprenticeship, your father introduces a new form of torment, books, or rather scrolls and parchments detailing city regulations, royal decrees, the myriad laws governing everything from petty theft to high treason, and the specific protocols for every conceivable type of execution. For what feels like another 2 years, you are drilled relentlessly. This job isn't just swinging a sword for money, he grunts, shoving a complexly worded statute under your nose. There are rules, procedures. Get one wrong, and it's your own neck on the line, or worse, a botched execution that turns the crowd into a riot. You must know the law as well as the magistrate, the ritual as well as any priest. You memorize the exact wording for proclaiming a sentence, the precise number of lashes for specific offenses, the correct way to display a traitor's head, the different methods of hanging for commoners versus nobles. It's a mountain of dry, cold text, a stark contrast to the visceral, bloody work you become accustomed to, yet it's all part of the same hideous tapestry. You're becoming not just a torturer and a potential headsman, but a reluctant scholar of state-sanctioned death. You are now versed in the art of agony and the letter of the law. The only question that remains is when he will finally deem you ready to combine these skills on the public stage for all the town to see. Dry parchment of legal statutes and the cold, hard lessons of the torture chamber become your unwelcome teachers for what feels like an age. You learn the precise language of sentencing, the hierarchy of crimes and their prescribed punishments, the subtle differences in dispatching a common thief versus a disgraced nobleman. Your father drills you relentlessly, his patience thin, his methods harsh. You can now recite the king's edicts on treason backwards and forwards, and you can keep a man alive on the brink of confessing for days if required. You have, in essence, earned your horrifying credentials in the theory and practice of state-sanctioned suffering. The day finally arrives, as you knew it must, with the same grim inevitability as winter follows autumn. Your father, after observing, you calmly discussing the legal ramifications of a botched quartering with a visiting bailiff, gives that almost imperceptible nod, the one that previously signified your graduation from one level of hell to the next. The cooper, John. "Ashton," he says, his voice flat, "convicted of striking a king's guard and inciting a riot. He hangs at noon, but today the town will see a beheading. More memorable, and you will be the one to deliver it, a beheading. Not the relative anonymity of a hanging where a lever is pulled and gravity does the grim work. This is steel, on flesh and bone, a direct personal act of severance. A cold dread, sharper and more profound than anything you've felt before, settles in your stomach. This is not practice with the dead, nor the shadowed work of the interrogation room. This is public, a performance of death with the entire town as its audience, and you as the lead actor in their most hated play. There is no refusing. The years of brutal tutelage have ground that option out of you. You can only nod your throat. Too tight for words. He makes you select the instrument yourself. A heavy two-handed sword, its blade long and wide, gleaming with a cold, pitiless light after your own meticulous sharpening. Or the broad axe, its curved edge designed for a single, decisive chop. You choose the sword. It feels cleaner. Somehow, though, the thought is a mockery. You spend the morning in a haze of grim preparation. You don your father's spare executioner's cloak, a garment of heavy black wool devoid of any adornment. It smells faintly of him, of old fear, and something metallic you now intimately recognize as dried blood. It's not meant to hide your identity. Everyone in this town knows who you are, who you're becoming. It's a uniform, a symbol, designed to strike fear into the hearts of the onlookers and, perhaps, to create a barrier between the boy you were and the man you must now become. Your father's only advice, offered as you stand ready to leave, is a gruff murmur. Keep your back straight, your grip firm, show no hesitation. They smell fear. Boy, like dogs. Fake it till you make it. The walk to the scaffold is the longest journey of your life. The square is packed, a sea of faces turned towards the platform of death. The murmur is louder today, more charged. As you ascend the steps, the crowd's gaze feels like a physical weight, a mixture of hatred, fear, and a dark primal fascination. You can hear your own heart hammering against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive silence that falls as you take your place. Your palms are sweating, your insides churning, but you force your face into the impassive mask your father wears so well. You see him standing to the side, watching, his expression unreadable. John Ashton, the condemned cooper, is dragged onto the platform. He's a burly man, but his face is ashen. his eyes wide with a terror that mirrors your own hidden panic. He's forced to his knees before the block, his pleas for mercy a desperate babble that the attending priest tries to soothe with murmured prayers and the offer of a crucifix. You stand for a moment, the heavy sword in your hands, the weight of every eye in the square pressing down on you. This is it, the culmination of years of brutal, soul-crushing preparation. You take your stance, feet planted, just as your father taught you. You raise the sword. The sun glints on the polished steel. Time seems to slow. You see the cooper's thick neck, the way his muscles tense, the frantic pulse beating just beneath the skin. Your father's words echo, one clean stroke. You don't wait. With a grunt that is torn from your very depths, you bring the sword down in a whistling arc. There is a sickening, fleshy thud, almost too quick to register. The cooper's head, eyes still wide with shock, flies from his shoulders, landing with a wet bounce on the stained planks of the scaffold. His body convulses once, a geyser of crimson erupting from the stump of his neck, then slumps forward. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd, followed by an eerie, stunned silence. The execution was so swift, so brutally efficient, that for a horrifying second, even you can't quite believe it happened. You are good. Disturbingly, terrifyingly good. The spell breaks. A woman screams. Someone vomits. Then the curses begin, a wave of vitriol washing over you from the crowd. Butcher! Devil's spawn! Murderer! Even the priest, after making the sign of the cross over the remains, steps back from you as if you are tainted beyond redemption, spitting discreetly onto the ground at your feet. Your father approaches, inspects your work with a critical eye, then gives another of his infinitesimal nods. Approval. You have passed his final, terrible test. You are no longer just the headsman's son, the apprentice. You have taken a life, publicly, proficiently. The black cloak feels heavier now, soaked, not just with the expectation of your role, but with the fresh, undeniable stain of its reality. You are the town executioner, and as the crowd disperses, their hatred a palpable force, you understand that this skill you've been forced to acquire has bought you nothing but their deepest contempt and a lifetime of utter, chilling isolation. That first beheading, so chillingly proficient, is a grim seal on your fate. There's no turning back, no other path. You are now in the eyes of the town, and under the cold, appraising gaze of your father, the one who wields the blade of justice. The executions continue, a relentless parade of condemned souls. With each one, you refine your terrible technique, your movements becoming more economical, your eye more practiced. You learn the subtle shifts in a man's posture that tell you he's about to faint or fight. You become adept at managing the crowd with a glare, your black-cloaked presence often enough to quell any nascent disturbance. Your father watches from the sidelines, his interventions less frequent now. He sees your skill, your disturbing aptitude for this bloody work, a mirror of his own grim capabilities. There's a silent, almost imperceptible shift. He is the elder, statesman of death. You are its active hand. Then comes the day he formally steps back. He doesn't make a grand announcement. That's not his way. He simply hands you the official writ for the next execution, a poisoner to be hanged, and says, "Your responsibility now, all of it." The title, unspoken but universally understood, is fully yours, the town's official executioner. The weight of it is immense, a leaden cloak you can never remove. He still offers curt advice, critiques your performance after a particularly difficult quartering, but the primary burden, the public face of death, is now yours alone. He begins to spend more time by the hearth, the shadows in his eyes, perhaps, a little deeper, or maybe that's just your own haunted reflection you see in them, and with this new terrible anointing come the privileges of your office, the bitter wages of sin. You are, it's true, paid for your services, a purse of coins for each hanging, a larger sum for a beheading or a burning. It's more money than many a craftsman sees, but it's blood money, and every coin feels cold and heavy in your palm. Beyond the direct payments, there are other, stranger perquisites. You are, in a grim way, a keeper of the market's peace. A sharp look from you can silence a brawl amongst merchants, or send a pickpocket scurrying. They fear you, and that fear grants you a certain unwilling deference. Some say the executioner has the right to take a toll from market stalls, a piece of fruit here, a loaf of bread there, though you rarely exercise this, the taste of such acquisitions too bitter to stomach. The most ghastly of these rights, however, is the executioner's due from the condemned themselves. After a life is taken, their worldly goods are forfeit. While the crown or the local lord might claim any significant property, the personal effects, the clothes on their back, the boots on their feet, often fall to you. Your wardrobe, therefore, becomes a macabre collection of other men's lives, a patchwork of the dead. The sturdy wool tunic you wear to ward off the winter chill might have belonged to the sheep rustler you hanged last autumn. The leather boots, surprisingly comfortable, were stripped from the lifeless feet of a highwayman. Each item is a silent testament to a life ended by your hand. This practice, more than any other, fuels the town's loathing. Imagine the scene. Young Thomas, whose father you beheaded for treason only a week prior, sees you striding through the square in his Daw's favorite, albeit now slightly blood-stained, jerkin. The hatred in his eyes is a palpable thing, a burning coal of grief and rage. He might dream of plunging a dagger into your back, but he won't. You are the executioner, an untouchable pariah, shielded by the very fear and disgust you inspire. The church, of course, wants nothing to do with you. You are unclean, a necessary evil, a tool for a job no holy man would ever sanction with his presence, beyond the obligatory last rites offered to the condemned. The heavy oak doors of the sanctuary are barred to you, save for perhaps a rare, city-wide mass where your presence at the very back, shunned and isolated, is grudgingly tolerated. You are denied the comfort of confession, the solace of communion. Your soul, it is widely assumed, is as stained as your hands. This spiritual desolation is a heavy burden, an echoing emptiness in a life already devoid of warmth and acceptance. You are feared, you are paid, you are, in a twisted way, provided for, but you are utterly alone. The townsfolk cross the street to avoid you. Mothers use your name to frighten their children into obedience. You are a living ghost, a walking memento mori, a constant reminder of death and retribution. And yet, through all this, through the blood and the curses and the chilling isolation, a strange, almost perverse expectation begins to surface from the very society that scorns you. You are expected to live some semblance of a normal life. You are expected eventually to marry. The thought is a cruel joke. Who would willingly bind their life to the town's butcher, the man whose touch is synonymous with death? The title of town executioner is now undeniably yours, a mantle of blood and bone you wear every waking moment. The grim privileges, the blood money, the macabre wardrobe stitched from the lives of the dead, the fearful deference of the marketplace, do little to warm the profound chill of your isolation. You are a pariah, a necessary monster in their eyes, and the spiritual desolation is a constant ache. Yet, amidst this life of public scorn and private torment, the town, in its own hypocritical way, still holds certain expectations. As the years begin to etch themselves onto your face, as your father retreats further into the shadows of old age, the unspoken pressure mounts. You are expected to marry. The notion is so ludicrous it might be laughable, were your life not a tapestry of such cruel ironies. Who, in this God-fearing, superstitious town, would willingly share the bed and board of the man whose hands are perpetually stained, literally or figuratively, with the blood of their kin, their neighbors, their friends? The loneliness, once a dull ache, sharpens into a keener pain. It's not romance you crave, Such tender emotions were scorched out of you long ago. It's companionship, perhaps. A shield against the crushing silence of your own home, someone to share the bleak landscape of your existence. You leave your father's house, the cottage of your grim childhood, and with the accumulated blood money, you purchase a small, sturdy dwelling on the very outskirts of town, as far from the judgmental eyes of the respectable folk as possible. It's a place where the whispers might be fainter, where the shadows feel a little less accusatory. Your attempts to find a wife through any conventional means are, of course, doomed from the start. No decent family will entertain the notion. Daughters are hidden away. Doors are politely but firmly closed in your face. You are met with averted gazes, muttered prayers for protection, and the ever-present scent of fear. You are the town's butcher, the dealer of death, and no dowry, no matter how handsome, and yours is not, can wash away that stain. It seems your fate is to be as solitary in your personal life as you are on the scaffold. But fate, in its own twisted way, sometimes provides. In the lowest taverns, in the darkest alleys, on the very fringes of society where the outcasts and the desperate congregate, your reputation is different. Here, fear mingles with a strange kind of respect, or at least an understanding of power, and it is here, in this underworld of lost souls, that you find her. She is a woman with no family to speak of, no reputation left to protect, one whose own life has been a series of hard bargains and harsh judgments. Perhaps she sells fleeting comfort to lonely men, or tells fortunes with a knowing glint in her eye, or maybe she simply exists in that space outside the town's rigid morality. The resource refers to her as someone as hated as you, perhaps a prostitute. Whatever her past, she sees you not as a monster, but as a man, one whose burdens, in their own way, mirror her own. She has eyes that have witnessed too much, a resilience forged in hardship, and a startling lack of fear when she looks at you. She's beautiful, in a wild, untamed way, and more importantly, she understands the language of survival in a hostile world. She has no one to impress, no societal standing, to lose by associating with you, the town's official purveyor of death. Your courtship, if it can be called such, is a blunt, unromantic affair, an understanding struck between two souls adrift in a sea of contempt. You offer her protection, a roof, a certain grim stability. She offers not love, perhaps not yet, but acceptance, a presence in the echoing silence of your life. The wedding is as stark and joyless as your childhood dreams. No priest dares to bless such a union within the church walls. Perhaps a wayward, defrocked friar mutters a few hasty words over you in your new home, his eyes darting nervously towards the door. There are no festive crowds, no joyous bells, no tables laden with celebratory fare. Your parents are there, your father stoic, your mother weeping quietly into her shawl. Your wife has no family to attend. One distant, grasping aunt of yours makes an appearance, likely lured by the promise of a free, albeit somber, meal. It is a bleak affair, a joining of two shadows under the disapproving gaze of the heavens, and yet, when the door closes on your small, isolated home, when the town's hatred is a distant murmur beyond your walls, there is a strange, fragile peace. In her company, you find a sliver of something that might, in a different life, have been called happiness. She doesn't flinch from your touch, doesn't recoil from your past or your present. She mends the clothes taken from dead men without comment, shares your rough table, and meets your haunted gaze with a steady one of her own. For an executioner, a man whose entire existence is steeped in death and revulsion, this quiet acceptance is a rarer and more precious commodity than any king's gold. This small, unexpected ember of warmth in the frozen landscape of your life is a dangerous thing, a vulnerability. But for now, As you lie beside another human being who does not shrink from you, it feels perilously, wonderfully like a reprieve. That fragile peace found in the shared shadows of your outcast marriage becomes an anchor in the ceaseless crimson tide of your existence. Your wife, a woman carved from the same unyielding stone as the town's ancient prison, does not offer saccharine comforts or false illusions. She offers presence. She listens when you rarely speak of the day's grim work, her gaze steady, unjudging. She washes the blood from your clothes with a pragmatic efficiency that mirrors your own on the scaffold. In her arms, in the quiet darkness of your isolated cottage, you find a respite, a temporary cessation of the horrors that claw at the edges of your sanity. It is not happiness, not in the way the poets sing of it, but it is a sustainable form of endurance, a shared burden that makes the crushing weight of your life infinitesimally more bearable. The seasons bleed one into another, each marked by its quota of hangings, beheadings, brandings, and the occasional dreadful spectacle of a burning. Execution follows execution. You become a grim fixture in the town's life, as constant as the church bells, though infinitely more dreaded. Your proficiency, once a source of private horror, evolves into a chilling artistry. Your name, spoken in hushed, fearful tones, begins to travel beyond the muddy lanes of your own town, carried by itinerant merchants and wandering minstrels who embellish your deeds with each retelling. You become a local legend, a bogeyman whispered about in neighboring shires. The headsman of Oakhaven, the crow feeder, the king's red hand. Some lords and abbots from distant jurisdictions even begin to send for you when their own local talent lacks the stomach or the skill for a particularly sensitive or gruesome task. You are famous in the way a wolf or a plague is famous, an entity of fear and finality. They say you've sent 1,000 souls to their maker, a grim tally that crawls under your skin, but this dark renown offers no solace. It doesn't lessen the weight of the black cloak, nor does it silence the chorus of the damned that sings in your ears each night. The faces of the condemned, a grotesque gallery of terror, despair, and sometimes horrifyingly defiance, flood your dreams. Their last words, their final choked gasps, the wet, sickening thud of a severed head, these are the lullabies that accompany your fitful sleep. The screams of their grieving kin become a permanent echo in the chambers of your heart. You are a master of your craft, yes, but it is a craft that hollows you out from the inside, leaving behind a shell of a man who performs his duties with cold precision while his soul slowly erodes. You take no pride in this gruesome ledger, this reputation built on a mountain of corpses. It is a brand, a curse made manifest. Then, in the midst of this desolate landscape of duty and dread, life in its inscrutable wisdom offers an unexpected, almost unbearable mercy. Your wife, your silent partner in this shadowed existence, gives birth. First a son, small and fierce, his tiny fists already clenched as if ready to fight the world. And a few years later, a daughter whose laughter, when it finally comes, is like the first birdsong after a long, brutal winter. For the first time in your wretched life, you experience a sensation so pure, so overwhelming, it threatens to crack the icy facade you've spent a lifetime constructing. True, unadulterated joy. You hold these small, fragile beings in your blood-stained hands, and something within you shifts, a tectonic rearrangement of your blighted soul. Their innocence is a blinding light in the darkness of your world. You love them with a ferocity that terrifies you, a raw protective instinct that dwarfs any fear you've ever known, even the fear of your own damning profession. Their needs become your new catechism. You strive to give them a good life, or at least a life shielded from the worst of yours. You ensure there is always food on the table, warmth in the hearth, even if the coins that pay for it are tainted. Their laughter, their small hands clutching yours, their unquestioning love, these become the reasons you continue to draw breath, the reasons you endure the scaffold, the stares, the curses. They are everything. You watch your son, his small face mirroring some of your own features, and a new, colder dread begins to creep in, a fear that has nothing to do with the ghosts of the executed. He is growing, thriving, blissfully unaware of the true nature of the shadows that cling to his father. You see him playing with sticks, mimicking the town guard, and you pray to any god that might still listen that he will never have to learn the feel of a different kind of wood, a different kind of steel. But the traditions of your world are ironclad, the expectations of a lineage like yours, a heavy, unyielding chain. As he takes his first steps, as he speaks his first words, the question, unspoken but monstrous, begins to form. How long can you protect him from the terrible legacy that flows through his veins, the same legacy that condemned you before you even knew its name? The joy your children bring is a fierce, defiant sunbeam in the otherwise Stygian darkness of your life. You watch your son grow, his laughter echoing in the small cottage, a sound so pure it almost makes you forget the screams that reside permanently in your own ears. You see his quick intelligence, his sturdy limbs, his innocent curiosity about the world beyond your isolated patch of land. And with every milestone he reaches, every spark of his burgeoning spirit, the cold dread you've carried for him since. His birth intensifies, coiling tighter around your heart. He is your son, your blood, and the shadow of the axe, the hereditary stain of your family's cursed profession, looms over his future, just as it once loomed over yours. You spend countless nights staring into the dying embers of the hearth, your wife's steady breathing beside you a small comfort, while you wrestle with the monstrous inevitability you see rushing towards him. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, something begins to change within you. It's not just the weight of the years, though they have indeed etched themselves deeply onto your face and into your soul. It's a physical betrayal. The muscles in your arms and back, once cords of iron, now ache with a persistent, weary throb after a day's work. The unwavering stance that made you a pillar of fear on the scaffold sometimes feels harder to hold, a subtle tremor occasionally running through your legs. More alarmingly, your hands, the instruments of your grim trade, the hands that have dispatched 1,000 souls with chilling precision, sometimes shake with a faint, uncontrollable tremor when you are at rest. You try to ignore it, to attribute it to fatigue or the damp chill of the changing seasons. But deep down, a cold realization takes root. You are beginning to fail. In your profession, there is no room for error. A moment's hesitation, a slight misjudgment of angle or force, a hand that wavers at the critical second. These are not mere professional failings. A mistake on the scaffold can mean a botched execution, a prolonged agony for the condemned that incites the volatile crowd to riot, or worse, a disabling injury to yourself if the prisoner struggles unexpectedly. A mistake means death, either yours, swift and brutal at the hands of an enraged mob, or slow and agonizing from an infected wound, or even a formal reprimand from the authorities that could see you stripped of your position and cast out, leaving your family destitute and vulnerable. The margin for error is razor thin, and you feel it closing in. The desperate, protective love you bear for your son, for your daughter, for the fragile peace you found with your wife, becomes a catalyst for the most agonizing decision of your life. The cycle, that relentless, blood-soaked inheritance, must continue. There is, you tell yourself in the darkest hours of the night, no other choice. To let your own skills falter completely before an heir is trained is to condemn your family to an unknown, likely terrible fate. Who would protect them if you were gone or incapacitated? Who would provide? The town would not suddenly soften its heart. This grim legacy, this cursed skill, is the only thing of value, however abhorrent, you have to pass on. It is, in a hideously twisted way, his only means of survival in a world that will offer him no other quarter. You hate it. You loathe the thought with every fiber of your being a self-disgust so profound it threatens to consume you. But you know what must be done. The day you take your son aside, he is perhaps 10 or 12, an age where boyhood innocence still clings to him like the scent of summer grass. He looks up at you with those bright, trusting eyes, the same eyes your wife possesses, and your heart breaks into 1,000 silent pieces. You lead him to the outbuilding, the stone shed that served as your own first classroom of horrors. The smell of old iron, whetstones, and something indefinably grim still clings to the air. You pick up a small lighter axe, one you rarely use. "It is time," you say, your voice hoarse, sounding like a stranger's to your own ears, "for you to learn the ways of our family." His smile falters, confusion clouding his face. Like being a guard, duh?" he asks, his voice hopeful. You see his dreams in that question, dreams of valor, of respect, dreams so far removed from the reality you are about to force upon him. The words feel like swallowing shards of glass. "No, son, not like a guard." And so you begin, just as your father began with you. You start with the tools, the cleaning, the sharpening. You show him the weight of the steel, the balance of the blade. You see the revulsion dawn in his eyes, the slow, horrified understanding. He hates it, just as you did. His small hands tremble as he holds the whetstone, his knuckles white as he grips the axe handle. You see your own childhood torment reflected in his pale, stricken face. You are carving the same accursed fate into his tender flesh, his innocent soul that was carved into yours. This, you tell yourself with a desperation that borders on madness. This is the only way he will survive. He must be better than you, stronger, colder, more proficient. Because in this life, the life of an executioner, you do not live by mercy. You live and die by the unforgiving edge of the blade. The first lesson has begun, and the unbearable echo of your own past screams in the suffocating silence of the shed. The stone shed, once your personal chamber of horrors, now becomes the classroom for your own son. Each reluctant footstep he takes towards it, each time his small hand trembles as he reaches for a tool, is a fresh stab of guilt in your already ravaged conscience. You see yourself in his wide, terrified eyes, in his pale set face, in the way he flinches when you speak too harshly. You are inflicting upon him the very nightmare that defined your youth, and the bitter irony, the monstrous necessity of it, grinds your soul to dust. You try to be different from your father, to offer a word of explanation where he offered only grunts and blows. But the subject matter, the brutal reality of this trade, allows for little softness. The lessons are inherently cruel, and you, as the teacher, become an instrument of that cruelty, however unwillingly. His first tasks are the same as yours were: cleaning the tools, learning their names and grim purposes, understanding the unforgiving nature of steel. He gags at the faint, lingering scent of blood on an axe you used only days before. He weeps silently when a sharpening stone slips and bites into his finger. And you, remembering your own father's harsh corrections, find yourself echoing them, your voice colder than you intend. Tears won't sharpen the blade, boy. Focus. A distracted hand here means a botched job later, and a botched job means you leave the threat hanging, the unspoken consequences understood from the fearful tales he's undoubtedly heard whispered in the town, even if he doesn't yet grasp their full meaning. He hates it, every moment of it, with a purity of revulsion that you remember all too well. Then comes the day you know you can no longer shield him from the scaffold's grim theater. A highwayman, long the terror of the King's Road, has been caught and condemned. It will be a hanging, a relatively straightforward affair, but for your son it will be his first immersion in public death. The night before, you can hear him, tossing in his straw pallet, small whimpers escaping his lips. You want to go to him, to tell him he doesn't have to do this, but the words die in your throat. your own failing strength, the tremor that sometimes seizes your hand when you grip. A sword is a constant chilling reminder of why this must be. He must learn. He must harden. He must be ready. You make him stand where your father made you stand, close enough to see, to smell, to feel the raw, visceral reality of it. You watch his face as the condemned man is dragged forth, as the rope is placed around his neck, as the priest intones the final prayers. You see the boy's knuckles, white as bone, as he grips the rough wood of the scaffold railing. You see the way his eyes dart from the prisoner to you, a silent, desperate appeal in their depths. When the trapdoor springs, when the body drops, and jerks with that sickening finality, a choked gasp escapes him. He sways, and for a moment you think he will fall, but he catches himself, his face the color of bleached linen. He doesn't vomit, not then, but the look in his eyes when he finally meets yours is one of such profound horror and dawning, terrible understanding that it's like looking into a mirror of your own damned past. The lessons escalate as they must. You cannot afford for him to be merely a spectator. The charnel field, your old detested classroom, is revisited. This time, however, you are the one wielding the knife on the exhumed corpse, forcing him to observe, to learn the grim cartography of the human body, its points of weakness, its thresholds of pain. You must know this, son. You find yourself saying, the words tasting like poison. Not to be cruel, but to be efficient, to understand what it takes. Sometimes the law demands answers before it demands a life. He tries to look away, his small body trembling with revulsion, but you hold him steady, your grip unyielding, just as your father held you. The hideous principle of you learn or you bleed is now yours to enforce, and each time you must strike him for a moment of inattention, for a flicker of defiance, born of sheer terror, a piece of your own heart dies. You are shaping him, breaking him, remaking him in the image of the thing you most despise, an executioner. His youthful laughter becomes a rarity. The light in his eyes dims, replaced by a guarded, knowing shadow that makes him look far older than his years. He performs the tasks, learns the gruesome lessons, because he understands, with the brutal clarity of a trapped animal, that there is no other way. His relationship with you, once one of simple filial affection, becomes strained, tainted by fear and a dawning resentment you see in his averted gaze. He is your son, and you love him with a desperate, aching intensity. But you are also his tormentor, the architect of his stolen innocence. You are succeeding in your terrible task, forging him into a tool capable of surviving this accursed life. But with every lesson learned, with every small step he takes down this bloodied path, you lose a little more of him and a little more of yourself. The echo of your past is not just a haunting memory. It is the horrifying, living blueprint for his future. The years that follow are a torment of a different, more insidious kind. You watch with a horrifying mixture of pride and profound despair as your son masters the grim curriculum you've forced upon him. His hands, once small and soft, become calloused and steady. The revulsion in his eyes, though never entirely extinguished, is banked down, replaced by a chilling competence that mirrors the one you were forced to cultivate decades ago. He learns the anatomy of pain, the precise language of the law, the grim theater of the scaffold. He is, as you so desperately and damnably intended, becoming better than you ever were. Quicker with the blade, colder in his demeanor, his youth a shield against the creeping physical frailties that now plague your own aging body. You still stand on the scaffold, but more often now as an overseer, a grim mentor, while he takes the lead. The town's hatred, once solely focused on you, now splits, encompassing him in its cold embrace. You see the whispers, the averted gazes, the way other children are snatched away when he passes, the unbearable echo of your own blighted youth. now playing out in his. And with each display of his burgeoning skill, each clean severance, each efficiently extracted confession, a piece of your soul withers. You have succeeded. You have ensured the survival of your line in the only way this cursed world allows. You have perpetuated the cycle of misery, just as your father did before you. The victory, if it can be called such, tastes of nothing but ash and blood. Your own strength wanes. The tremor in your hands becomes more pronounced. The aches in your joints are a constant, gnawing reminder of your mortality and of the countless lives your body has been instrumental in ending. There are days when the mere thought of lifting the heavy executioner's sword sends a wave of exhaustion through you. You are becoming obsolete, a relic of a bloodier past, even as your son steps fully into the role. There is no quiet retirement for an executioner, no peaceful fading into obscurity. The stain of your profession is indelible, a brand upon your soul that will follow you to the grave and beyond. You are still the old headsman, the town's bogeyman, even as your shadow on the scaffold begins to shrink. Your wife, your silent, steadfast companion in this long winter of a life, watches you both with eyes that hold a universe of unspoken sorrow. She sees the toll it takes on you, the slow dying of the light within, and she sees the same shadows beginning to gather in your son's eyes. Your daughter, perhaps the only untainted joy in your life, is shielded as much as possible. But even she cannot entirely escape the chilling atmosphere of your home, the unspoken horrors that cling to its walls. She learns early to tread softly, to ask no questions about her father's or her brother's grim absences. In the quiet, desperate hours of the night, when the ghosts of 1,000 executions dance in the flickering candlelight, you reflect on the bitter circular path of your existence. Your father, you, your son, an unbroken chain of men condemned by birth to walk a road paved with death and revulsion. Was there ever a choice? A moment when the links might have been shattered? Or was this always preordained, a cruel jest, played by a pitiless God or an indifferent fate? You remember your own childish dreams of a different life, dreams your son undoubtedly harbored as well, now brutally extinguished by the grim reality of your shared legacy. The weight of their collective deaths, the ones you inflicted and the ones your son will now inflict, presses down on you, a physical burden that makes it hard to draw breath. You see your son return from an execution, his face pale but set in that familiar mask of cold composure you taught him so well. He cleans his tools with a meticulousness that would make your own father nod in grim approval. He is you, reborn into the same hell. And in that moment, the full crushing weight of why it sucks to be born a medieval executioner settles upon you with the finality of a coffin lid. It's not just the blood, the fear, the hatred from others. It's not just the nightmares or the isolation. It's the utter lack of escape, the relentless perpetuation of suffering, the terrible knowledge that you have become the monster you once despised, and that you have, out of a twisted, desperate sense of love and duty, forged your own beloved son into the same fearsome, broken thing. Your legacy is not one of deeds or monuments, but of inherited pain, a lineage steeped in the sorrow of others, a name that will forever be synonymous with the last terrible moments of a condemned life. There is no redemption, no solace, only the cold, hard truth of the blade passed from one trembling, unwilling hand to the next, generation after generation, in the endless, shadowed winter of your family's curse. Thanks for sticking with this grim journey to the bitter end. I truly enjoy delving into these darker corners of history and imagining what life might have been like for those who lived them. If you found this tale compelling, or if it made you think, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future explorations of lives less ordinary. Got an idea for another historical figure or a profession whose story needs to be told? especially if it's one of those why it sucks to be scenarios. Drop it in the comments below. I genuinely do read them and get some of my best ideas from you guys.